If you found this video, you're probably thinking about moving abroad, or maybe you're interested specifically in living in Italy. If you're new here, my name is Rose, and about 5.5 years ago, I sold everything I owned and I moved to Italy with 2 suitcases and my cat. And since I've been on YouTube now for about 9 months and I've gotten a lot of new subscribers, so thanks for all of you who are supporting my channel. So I thought I'd make a video to answer some of the most common questions that I've been asked about moving abroad and my experience moving to Italy specifically. If you want me to expand on any of my answers here, or if you have other questions, feel free to post your questions in the comments. I'm pretty much an open book, so I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Okay, the first question is, what kind of visa did I use to move here? If you've seen some of my previous videos, you'll probably already know this, but I actually did not have to have a visa to move to Italy because I have dual citizenship. So I did make another video about how I got dual citizenship. I'll link it here if you're interested. But the short version is my grandmother was from Sicily. Because of the way that Italian citizenship works, they call it citizenship by descent, which means that due to my family ties, I was eligible for citizenship. So I went through this process about 15 years ago while I was still in the US. So I don't know if I can answer specific questions about how the process is now. They are constantly changing the laws, and they've actually changed them pretty recently. So I have an Italian passport, and that's how I moved to Italy without having a place to live or a job sponsorship or anything like that. If you're curious about the visa process to move to Italy, I know a little bit about the other visas that you can qualify for as an American citizen or from other countries as well. So visas aren't specifically easy to get in Italy, but I know a lot of people have done it. There's different pathways you can look into, like student visas. There's a new digital nomad visa that they just started a few years ago. And one of the more common ways is a retirement visa called the elective residency visa. But I'm not an expert, so if you are interested in moving to Italy and you need a visa, you need to use the Italian consulate closest to where you live to apply for the visa. They all have websites, so you can go there and find out what it takes to qualify, what you need, what documentation you need, everything you need to move. Okay, the second question is, how long did it take to plan your move to Italy? So because I didn't need a visa, my time frame for moving was a lot shorter than it would be for, I think, other people. I wouldn't recommend doing it this quickly, but I actually only spent a few months between the time I decided to move and the time that I actually moved to Italy. I was in a hurry, kind of for a lot of reasons that I won't get into here, but I didn't have anything holding me back, and I actually didn't even have a job at the time, but I knew I could get one quickly. I had enough savings to make the move, and also selling all my things really helped me raise my money for the move. I think it was about 2.5 months between the time I really decided to move and the time I actually moved. I know it sounds short, but that's what I did. I sold and gave away everything except for about 2 suitcases, a backpack, and my cat carrier, so all of her stuff as well. It was definitely a whirlwind. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I was super laser focused, but I also wasn't working at the time, so that was my full-time job, was getting everything ready to move. It was kind of a weird time in my life and a weird time in the world, but I think without the technology we have now and like how you can sell things really quickly online, I don't think I would have been able to do it. If any piece of it went wrong or got delayed, then it all would have blown up. So that was how long it took. About 2.5, 3 months of planning. Number 3, sort of related, is how did you decide what to bring and what to leave or get rid of? Moving is a really stressful thing anytime you do it, whether it's just to another house or to another country. But for me, I really like the process of shedding and getting rid of things. I don't like doing it, but I like the result afterwards. It feels so freeing to just get rid of everything. And I knew I would have to be potentially moving after the first month because I only had a temporary place. I knew I couldn't bring a lot of stuff. I didn't want to put stuff in storage indefinitely. I left a few boxes of things that I couldn't bring with me, but I wanted to keep and come back for later. Those were like photos and letters, but everything else like clothes, furniture, art pieces, I either gave it away or I just got rid of it. I don't really get attached to things, so it wasn't that difficult for me. I had a ton of clothes, but I didn't really love any of them, so it really forced me to decide, okay, what are the things that I just wear all the time that I need? I was moving from Southern California where it's mostly sunny all year. I didn't have any winter clothes. I knew I would have to buy some new things anyway for the seasons. So I just brought some clothes, enough for the summer and a little bit of fall, and then I figured I would buy the rest. The hardest thing to get rid of was my books. Always been a reader. I've had a book collection since I can remember. It was difficult. I kind of wish that I would have kept a few boxes of books and had them shipped later. I didn't really know. I thought shipping was super expensive and I just didn't want to burden my family and leave a bunch of boxes with them. It's really hard to replace books. Eventually I've already built up a small book collection here, but I haven't rebought the same books, and I'm kind of sad about that, but everything just had to go. I think that makes it easier in some ways and harder in other ways. I couldn't imagine trying to get from the airport to the Airbnb to my second Airbnb I had to stay at to my new apartment, all of that. If I had like 3 or 4 or 5 suitcases, logistically it just didn't work. But at the same time, because I didn't ship anything and I didn't have anything, I had to rebuy a lot of things like my computer or my desk setup. I always use a keyboard and a monitor when I work, so I had to rebuy those things that I couldn't bring with me. Number 4 was it hard to move with a cat? It's not as hard as people think it is, especially if you just have one pet. That was the first thing that I tried to figure out. As soon as I thought I'm definitely moving to Italy, I didn't buy any plane ticket or make any plans until I looked up how to move with a pet, what the process was, how long it would take, and I made my timeline around that process. It does take a series of steps, and it does cost a little bit of money, but it's not as much as you think. It depends on which country you're coming from. But from the US to Italy, the biggest expense was actually beforehand was getting health certificate. She already had a microchip, but that's required, and you have to get the rabies vaccine, but it has to be a certain amount of time before your flight. You just have to be aware of the timing. You have to be aware of what all the documentation you need, communicate with the airlines and make sure that they allow pets, that there's space for your pet. They have to weigh her. She has to be under a certain weight with the carrier. So there's all these details involved. And it was a little trickier because it was during the pandemic, so a lot of things were closed. Like the vet, for example, I had to drop her off and pick her up. I couldn't go in with her, but it wasn't that difficult. And of course I would not have even done it if it was impossible to do, because she's my family. And so I wasn't going to leave her behind. Just be aware, if you're moving with a pet, you do need to plan a little bit more in advance and just make sure you have the extra expenses set aside for that. The next question is, I'm kind of always embarrassed to answer this. Do you speak fluent Italian, and did you know the language before you moved? I did study Italian before I moved, but years before. So when I was in university, right before I was going to Italy for the first time, when I was 19, 20 years old, I took Italian at my university for 2 or 3 semesters. So I knew the basics. I knew enough to communicate and get by. And that was definitely key, especially at the time, because there was no Google Translate or any sort of help if you didn't speak the language. I feel like I picked up more of it when I was there, but that was only for a few months and I wasn't really using it a lot. Right before I moved, I hadn't really spoken Italian in a really long time. I still remembered the basics, but I really had way more confidence than I should have. But I definitely think language is important, and I have been studying a lot since I've been here. So right now, I think my level is close to B1, which is still I don't think it's really close to fluent, but I have enough Italian where I can communicate. I wouldn't have been able to find an apartment without speaking Italian. I've had to sign up for utilities and talk to phone companies and gas companies and do basic daily life things without a problem. I can understand pretty much everything in general conversation. My problem right now is having the confidence of speaking, and I know it's been many years, but because I don't work in Italian, all my work is in English. I don't have a lot of Italian friends still. I have 1 or 2. So I don't speak a lot day to day. I don't practice a lot. I thought when I moved here that I would just be so much easier to pick up and I would just be fluent within the first year or so. It's more difficult than I thought. I don't know if I'm worse than I thought at learning languages. Also, my perfectionist tendencies, I am really shy about speaking because I don't want to make mistakes. I don't know. I have insecurities about not speaking perfectly, even though I know I need to get over that. I've taken several Italian classes since I've been here, and that's helped. I've taken some group lessons, both online and in person, which I really enjoy, the group dynamics of a class. But the thing with group classes is that you don't get a lot of chance to practice speaking. And I think at this point, I'm trying to practice speaking more automatically without having to think and translate the words in my head, which is what slows you down. You know, you can't really have conversations that way. It's really hard because you don't feel like yourself. You don't feel like you're speaking as you, because you can't have the intelligent, high-level conversations until you're really fluent. So I want to get to that point where I can really speak to people and be myself and not just feel like I'm speaking like a 7-year-old child with a basic vocabulary. This year, I'm signed up to italki, which is an app where you talk to people on the phone. They have actual teachers with teaching experience and also just conversational tutors. I'm going through right now and doing some trial lessons and really trying to find my one person that I can talk to at least once or twice a week, and that way just improve my Italian. So I have a link to italki. I think it's a really great system. So I'll update you guys on that process. But number 6 is, how did you find long-term housing? So I actually did make a longer video about this. I'll link it here. But I could talk about this forever because I've had to do apartment searches twice. Back in 2020 when I moved here, the second Airbnb I was staying at, she was looking for a long-term tenant, but I didn't really love the neighborhood. I didn't like the apartment that much, so I wanted to keep looking. I just looked into every avenue I could. I asked everyone that I met. I was looking mostly through the websites for apartment rentals. I think in general in Italy, people are much more responsive on the phone if you call them versus if you text or message them. Once I found the neighborhood that I liked, I would walk into the agencies because I felt less intimidated walking in, especially if you don't speak as much Italian. I think when you're sitting there standing in front of them, it's harder for people to be rude and like shoo you away. I finally did find a place just through really sheer force of will and just knowing that I had to make it happen. It is difficult, like being from out of town, not knowing anyone, not having anyone to vouch for you. That's the hardest part, is they can reject you because you don't have a local job, because you are a freelancer, because you are a foreigner. There's a lot of reasons, but when it comes down to it, the agent and the owner of my first apartment, we met up. I met them in person, and the owner just said, "You seem like a good person. I'm going to give you a chance." And I liked living in that place for 4 years, and then I had to move. So I did make another video about that. I made a few videos about finding a rental the second time, which was way more difficult than it was the first time, which I didn't think it would be, but it was. Okay, the next question is, what do you do for work? That's a hard question to answer because I do so many things. Even in the US, I was always sort of a multi-passionate person. I've always had several different types of jobs at once. Since I've been here, I've taught English, both online and in person. I've taught business English, one-on-one students, and English for hospitality, which was really fun. I do like teaching, but for me, it's never been a really reliable source of income because the schedule is always different. You're always getting a different number of classes unless you teach for one specific school, like in the public school system. So I always did that part-time. My degrees are in English and creative writing, so I've done copywriting, I've done editing, I've done some work doing content creation for brands through like user-generated content. What I like to do the most is developmental editing, and I'm going to be focusing more on that this year, which is working with fiction authors on their manuscript to make sure that the plotting, the pacing, the characters, that everything fits together. So that's what I'll be doing more of this year and in the future. A lot of people assume that if you're living abroad, you're either independently wealthy or you are working remotely for some American company and getting your American salary. And that's just not always true. It's not as common as people think, and it's not as easy as people think to be able to just transport your remote job to another country. So the time zone difference is always an issue. If you're at like a corporate 9 to 5 type of job and you move overseas, then your schedule is way different. And a lot of people don't like it. You end up working from like 3 o'clock to midnight when you should be having aperitivo, going out to dinner, and doing all the things that Italians do in their free time. Your schedule will be opposite. So I don't know a lot of people who do that the way that my schedule works, because I work with individual clients and I work all on my own schedule, so I can live more of an Italian lifestyle. That's the answer to what I do for work. It's always changing, and I think it will continue to change. I hope to also be making money from YouTube. I don't really consider this a job, but my goal is to get monetized, and I'm very, very close. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now. Okay, let's keep going. So the next thing that people ask is, do you miss having a car? And will you ever get your Italian driver's license? So actually, no. I was in my car like 2 hours, 3 hours a day in LA, and that's completely normal. Even on days that you don't commute for work, you are just driving to the store like 5 miles down the road, usually takes 30 minutes in the car, and there's always traffic. And I was never a fan of driving, even when I had to do it every day. It was just something you had to do. I really enjoy being in a city where I don't have to drive. I've talked about this before, so I really don't miss it. I don't even go into cars really unless I am taking a taxi to the airport. If some place is too far to walk, then I just take public transportation. I just don't miss driving. I don't know if I ever will get a car here. If I live in Turin for a long time, I don't think that I will. People that I know who have cars, they don't even drive them unless they are leaving town. So it is useful to have one if I wanted to explore the country a little bit more. Sometimes it's more convenient to take a car than a train, but with gas and tolls and everything, it's really expensive to be driving every day. And parking fees, registration, car payments, and all of that. I don't miss any of the expenses that come with cars, and I don't see myself driving anytime soon. I may have to get an Italian driver's license at some point. Right now, my US license is still active only because I use it when I go to the US to visit. I usually have to drive, so I have to keep a license. But getting an Italian license is super expensive. The only reason that I would be motivated to do it is if I wanted to have a car and be driving it here every day. So as long as I don't need one, I don't know if I'll ever have a car again. And the last question is, will you ever move back to the US? This is a tough question to answer. At this point, and in the past 5 years since I've lived here, I've never really had the desire to move back to the US. I don't know if I ever will. I'll never say never, because there could be reasons why I have to move back. One of the things that's the hardest part of being here is being so far from my family. My parents are older, and it really breaks my heart to be so far away from them for such long periods of time. I do go back and visit as often as I can, but it's definitely not as much as I used to see them. So that part is really hard. So I think I do see a time where maybe I will go back for several months at a time. I've made several videos about things that I don't miss about the US, why I prefer living in Italy, and I don't want to get into that here, but it's hard. It's hard to be away from my sisters, my nieces, my nephews, and I do have still friends in the US that I keep in touch with. It gets kind of hard on holidays. You can't go back for every holiday, and I do miss being with my family and friends, but I don't miss really anything else about the US. It's nice to be someplace where everyone speaks your language, and things that I've talked about in other videos, like one of my comfort foods that I've grown up with is Mexican food, and that's hard to come by in Italy, but it's really not enough. My life is just so much better here in so many ways, just as on a daily basis. And I can't picture what my life would look like if I went back to the US. If I got tired of Italy for whatever reason, which I don't see that happening, but if I did, I would more likely go live in another country. But yeah, moving back to the US, I just don't see it happening. But that's the last of the questions I have. I know this was a long one, but thanks for watching and supporting my channel. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I do read the comments, and I try to answer as many as I can. And once again, I'll ask you to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.